The old man's trembling hands clutched the worn coffee cup as 6-year-old Sarah approached with half a sandwich. His disguise was perfect. No one would suspect Howard Bennett, owner of Bennett Industries, was hiding beneath those ragged clothes. But as the little girl smiled and offered her only meal, something broke inside him. He'd tested hundreds before her, yet no one had shown such genuine kindness, but nobody could have predicted what would happen next. Before we start, let's create a wave of positivity. If you'd like, share a word that describes how you're feeling today. Please like this video and follow our channel if you want to be part of our community. The autumn wind scattered crimson leaves across Millfield's community park as Amanda Collins checked her watch. Her shift at the diner started in 30 minutes, and the babysitter had just cancelled. "Sarah, honey, we need to go now," Amanda called, her voice carrying a weight her 31-year-old shoulders had become accustomed to bearing. 6-year-old Sarah looked up from the playground sandbox, her blonde curls dancing in the wind, blue eyes sparkling despite the worn, hand-me-down coat. "5 more minutes, Mummy." "Please?" Amanda sighed, calculating minutes in her head. Since David's death 2 years ago, every minute had become a careful calculation. 2 jobs, 2 children, and never enough of anything, time, money, or energy. "Jack," she called to her 10-year-old son, who was kicking a half-deflated soccer ball against a tree. "We need to go in 5. Jack nodded, his serious face too mature for a child his age. He'd grown up overnight when his father's heart had suddenly stopped during a morning run, leaving behind funeral expenses that had depleted their modest savings. An old man sat alone on a bench at the edge of the park. His clothes were tattered, his grey beard unkempt. But it was his eyes that drew Sarah's attention, deep blue and somehow sad, yet still alert and observant as they tracked the passing strangers who deliberately looked away. Sarah tugged at the brown paper bag in her coat pocket. Inside was half a peanut butter sandwich, all Amanda had been able to pack for her daughter's lunch. "Mommy," Sarah whispered, pointing discreetly, "that man looks hungry." Amanda glanced over, her expression softening momentarily before hardening again with reality's edge. "Sarah, we need to go. And remember what I told you about talking to strangers." But Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the old man. "He looks like Grandpa did in the pictures before he went to heaven." What Amanda didn't know was that the disheveled old man was actually Howard Bennett, whose net worth exceeded $14 billion. At 78, with no family left except a distant sister who called only when she needed money, Howard had received news that had changed everything. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months to live at best. The diagnosis had sent him on this unusual journey. Disguised as homeless, he'd spent the past month observing humanity in its rawest form. Who would acknowledge him? Who would help with no expectation of return? Who deserved to be the unexpected heir to his vast fortune? A fortune built over decades, some parts of it with origins that still haunted his dreams 50 years later. "Hello," came a small voice, startling Howard from his thoughts. He looked up to find the little blonde girl from the playground standing before him, her mother watching nervously from a distance. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her small hand formally. "Are you hungry? I have a sandwich." And before Howard could respond, she pulled the half sandwich from her pocket and held it out proudly. "It's peanut butter, my favorite." Howard's weathered hand trembled as he accepted the offering. "That's very kind, but don't you need this?" Sarah shrugged, the gesture disarmingly adult for her 6 years. "Mommy can make more at home." The lie came easily, a child's attempt to preserve dignity. "Sarah!" her mother called, anxiety evident in her voice. "I have to go," Sarah said. "My mommy works really hard, and I can't make her late." As she turned to leave, she added, "I hope you find somewhere warm to sleep tonight. It's going to be cold." Howard watched as Sarah rejoined her family. The mother knelt, clearly scolding her daughter about talking to strangers, but not about giving away her lunch. Then the woman surprised him. She looked back at Howard, hesitated, then nodded a silent acknowledgement before hurrying her children away. Howard sat motionless, the half-sandwich growing heavy in his hand. In his 6 weeks of testing humanity, this was the first pure act of kindness he'd witnessed, from a child who clearly had almost nothing to give. Richard Moore, Howard's attorney and closest confidant for 30 years, emerged from his parked car once the family had disappeared from view. "Well?" Richard asked, helping Howard to his feet. At 78, even playing homeless for a few hours took its toll on his body. "Find out everything about that family," Howard said, his voice suddenly strong with purpose. "Everything." Richard's eyebrows rose. "The little girl? Are you sure? There are still other neighborhoods to visit, other tests to—" "I'm dying, Richard," Howard cut him off sharply. "I don't have time for more tests. That child gave me her lunch when she had nothing else." He paused, looking thoughtfully in the direction the family had gone. "But I won't be hasty this time. I've made that mistake before. We'll research thoroughly, observe them in their daily lives. I want to know who they truly are before I make any decisions." Oi. The eastern edge of Millfield, with its cracked sidewalks and buildings in various states of disrepair, existed in stark contrast to the gleaming downtown district just 2 miles away. In apartment 3B of the Parkview Apartments, Amanda Collins stood in front of an open refrigerator, taking inventory of their dwindling supplies. Half a gallon of milk, 2 eggs, some wilted celery, bread that would last another day if she was careful. Payday was still 3 days away. She closed the refrigerator and leaned her forehead against the cool surface, allowing herself exactly 5 seconds of despair before straightening her shoulders. 5 seconds was all she permitted herself these days. "Is there any juice?" Jack asked, entering the small kitchen with his math homework. Amanda forced a smile. "No juice today, buddy. How about some water? I can add a little lemon to it." Jack shrugged, already accustomed to disappointment. "It's okay. Water's fine." From the small living room that doubled as the children's bedroom at night, Sarah's voice rose in animated conversation with her stuffed animals. A tea party with imaginary cookies and cakes far more abundant than anything in their actual kitchen. "Mum, I need $5 for a field trip tomorrow," Jack said, sliding a permission slip across their scratched kitchen table. Amanda's heart sank. $5 might as well have been 500 today. "I'll figure it out," she promised, making a mental note to ask Mrs. Jenkins next door if she needed any small tasks done. "It's okay if I can't go," Jack said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Peterson said some kids will stay behind and help organize the classroom library." The practiced maturity in her son's question broke Amanda's heart. Since David's death, Jack had taken on the role of man of the house with a seriousness that sometimes made her want to cry. Sarah, meanwhile, had developed an almost preternatural empathy, always attuned to others' needs despite their own struggles. Across town, in a neighborhood that seemed to exist in an entirely different world, Howard Bennett sat in his wood-paneled study, examining the files Richard had already compiled on the Collins family. Amanda Collins, 31. Widowed. Husband David Collins died of a sudden heart attack 2 years ago at age 33, despite no previous health conditions. Life insurance minimal, due to their youth and tight budget. Currently working as a waitress at Millfield Diner from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and as a night custodian at Millfield Community College from 6 p.m. 11 p.m. In between, she took online classes, slowly working toward a nursing degree. Jack Collins, 10. 4th grade at Millfield Elementary. Good student despite spotty attendance. Teacher notes indicated he was unusually mature and protective of his younger sister. Sarah Collins, 6. 1st grade at the same school. Described as bright, creative, and remarkably empathetic for her age. "They're good people, Howard," Richard said, placing another stack of papers on the mahogany desk. "The mother holds everything together somehow. The landlord says she's never missed rent, though she's often a few days late." Howard studied a photograph taken that afternoon by the private investigator Richard had hired, Amanda Collins, in her waitress uniform, dark circles under her eyes as she hurried from the diner to pick up her children. "What about extended family?" Howard asked. "Grandparents? Siblings? Anyone who might complicate matters or have claims on the children?" Richard shook his head. "Amanda's father died before Sarah was born. Her mother lives in a nursing home in Oregon, early onset Alzheimer's. She hasn't seen her in over 3 years due to finances. David's parents are both deceased. He had a brother in the military who's currently deployed overseas on his 3rd tour in Afghanistan, expected back in about 6 months. And her finances? Any red flags?" "Nothing concerning," Richard replied. "Some student loan debt in deferment, a medical bill payment plan from her husband's final hospital stay. No credit card debt, surprisingly. She seems to live strictly within her means, however limited those are." Howard nodded thoughtfully. "Continue the surveillance for another week. I want to be absolutely certain before proceeding." "Howard," Richard said carefully, "are you really considering what I think you are? There are charitable foundations, trust funds, scholarships, ways to help this family without the extremity of what you're contemplating." Howard's weathered hand brushed across the photo of Sarah. "I've donated millions to charities over the years, Richard. What difference has it really made? This is different. This is direct. This is personal." The Millfield Diner hadn't changed its decor since 1982, but the vinyl booths and chrome-edged tables held a certain retro charm that kept the place busy. Amanda moved efficiently between tables, coffee pot in hand, her customer service smile firmly in place, despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. "Order up for table 7, Gus," the short-order cook called through the service window. Amanda balanced the plates along her arm with practiced skill. Eggs over easy, hash browns, side of bacon for the businessman in the corner who tipped well but never looked up from his phone. Veggie omelette for the retired teacher who always brought a novel to read. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, setting the plates down carefully. The businessman shook his head without looking up. The teacher smiled warmly. "This looks wonderful, dear. And how are your little ones doing?" Amanda's professional smile softened into something genuine. "They're good, Mrs. Peterson. Jack got an A on his science project, and Sarah's learning to read chapter books. Such bright children," Mrs. Peterson said, "and a credit to their mother." The small compliment carried Amanda through the next hour of coffee refills and order-taking. At her break, she slipped into the back alley, where employees took their 15 minutes of freedom, pulled out her phone, and made a familiar call. "Mrs. Jenkins, it's Amanda. I was wondering if you might need any help around your house this week. Maybe some cleaning or organizing?" She paused, listening. "That would be perfect. Thank you so much." One problem solved. The $5 for Jack's field trip would come from helping their elderly neighbor sort through her late husband's clothes for donation. Mrs. Jenkins had become a surrogate grandmother to the children in the 2 years since they'd moved into the apartment building, often watching them between school and Amanda's night shift. She didn't notice the black luxury sedan parked across the street, or the distinguished grey-haired man watching the diner through its tinted windows. Inside the car, Howard Bennett observed the small blonde waitress re-enter the diner. There was a dignity in her movements, a quiet resilience that reminded him of his own mother, who had raised him alone after his father abandoned them when Howard was just 4. "She works hard," Richard commented from the driver's seat. The background check came back clean. No criminal record, no debts apart from the ones we already knew about, no suspicious activities. Howard nodded, satisfied but not surprised. He had recognized something in Amanda Collins yesterday, a fierce protectiveness combined with genuine kindness. And what about the further investigation into Sarah? You said there was something interesting in her school records. Richard consulted his tablet. Yes, an incident from last year. Apparently there was a new student, a boy with autism who was having trouble adjusting. The other children were avoiding him, some even teasing him. According to the teacher's note, Sarah appointed herself his protector. She sat with him at lunch, included him in games, even gave up being line leader, apparently a coveted position, so he could have a special job. Howard smiled faintly. Her mother must have taught her well. It seems to be innate, Richard replied. The school counselor noted that Sarah has an unusual capacity for empathy. When asked why she was helping the boy, she simply said, "Because his heart hurts, and I know what that feels like." Howard's eyes misted unexpectedly. She knows what loss feels like at only 6, yet she chooses kindness instead of bitterness. The mother has done a remarkable job with both children, considering their circumstances, Richard observed. The boy, Jack, is equally impressive in his own way, takes advanced math classes, helps younger students with reading. Howard sat in silence for a moment, watching through the window as Amanda moved between tables inside the diner, her movements efficient, yet somehow graceful, despite her obvious fatigue. "I've seen enough," he said finally. "Begin drafting the documents. I want everything ready by the end of next week." Sarah couldn't sleep. Outside their apartment window, rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the glass, but it wasn't the weather keeping her awake. Something felt different tonight, a flutter of anticipation in her stomach like Christmas Eve or the night before a birthday. Beside her, on the pull-out sofa bed, Jack slept soundly, one arm flung protectively across his sister even in sleep. On the other side of their thin apartment wall, Sarah could hear her mother's soft footsteps as she prepared for the next day. Lunches packed, clothes laid out, a system born of necessity and perfected through exhaustion. Sarah slipped out from under her brother's arm and padded softly to the doorway. Her mother sat at their small kitchen table, textbook open, pen moving across a notebook as she studied in the narrow window between her evening custodial shift and the few hours of sleep she allowed herself. "Mommy?" Sarah whispered. Amanda looked up, fatigue evident in the shadows beneath her eyes, but her smile was genuine. "Hey, sweet pea. Can't sleep?" Sarah shook her head, blonde curls bouncing. "I was thinking about the man in the park." Amanda's expression softened. Despite her initial alarm at seeing her daughter approach a stranger, she couldn't bring herself to scold Sarah for her compassion. "That was very kind of you to share your sandwich," she said carefully. "But remember what we discussed about talking to people you don't know?" "He reminded me of the pictures of Grandpa," Sarah said, ignoring the gentle reprimand. His eyes were sad. "Do you think he's okay? It's raining." Amanda's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. How did she explain homelessness to a 6-year-old? How did she balance teaching caution without extinguishing the beautiful empathy that made Sarah so special? "There are shelters where people can go when it rains," Amanda explained, hoping it was true for the old man, knowing it often wasn't. "Come here, sweetie." Sarah climbed onto her mother's lap, fitting perfectly against her chest. "You have the biggest heart," Amanda whispered into her daughter's hair, "just like your daddy did. He always wanted to help everyone too." "Do you think Daddy would be proud of me?" Sarah asked sleepily, the rhythm of her mother's heartbeat finally lulling her toward sleep. "More than you could possibly know," Amanda assured her, blinking back sudden tears. "He'd be so proud of both you and Jack." When Sarah's breathing deepened into sleep, Amanda carried her back to the sofa bed and tucked her in beside her brother. She stood watching her children for a moment, love and fear warring in her heart as they did every night. Across town, Howard Bennett also lay awake, though for different reasons. The pain had returned sharper than before, a vicious reminder of the cancer steadily consuming him from within. The medication Dr. Chen had prescribed sat untouched on his bedside table. He needed clarity for tomorrow, not the foggy comfort the pills would bring. His bedroom, with its vaulted ceiling and hand-carved furniture imported from Italy, felt cavernous around him. In his entire mansion, with its 12 bedrooms and staff of 8, not a single room felt like home. He had built a monument to success, not a place of belonging. Howard reached for the phone and dialed a familiar number, despite the late hour. "The surveillance reports confirm everything," Richard answered without preamble, accustomed to his client's odd hours. 2 weeks of observation, and they're exactly what they appear to be. "The trust documents are ready for your review. I've included provisions for Amanda's mother's care and stipulations about financial counseling for Amanda." "And Eleanor?" Howard asked, naming his sister. Richard's sigh was audible. "She won't be happy, Howard. The token inheritance you've allocated for her is more than generous, considering she's only contacted me 3 times in the past decade, all for money." Howard finished firmly. "The decision is made, Richard." "She might retaliate," Richard warned. "Bring up old business, Westbrook perhaps, or Lake Geneva." Howard's grip tightened on the phone. All names from his past, all situations where his business decisions had caused collateral damage to others. "Let her try. We've buried those records deep, and I've spent 50 years making amends. The Collins family will be protected from Eleanor's spite." 10 days after Sarah shared her sandwich with a stranger, Amanda hurried home from her diner shift, grateful that Mrs. Jenkins had agreed to watch the children between school and Amanda's night job. As they approached their apartment building, Sarah skipping ahead while Jack described his science experiment, Amanda noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside, a black luxury sedan that looked wildly out of place in their neighborhood. Her protective instincts flared immediately. "Jack, take your sister inside. Use your key. I'll be right there." Jack nodded seriously, taking Sarah's hand and leading her toward the building entrance, his young shoulders squaring with responsibility. Amanda approached the vehicle cautiously. The driver's window lowered smoothly, revealing a distinguished man in his 40s, wearing a crisp suit. "Miss Collins?" he inquired politely. "My name is Richard Moore. I represent Howard Bennett. He would like to speak with you and your children, if you would permit it." Amanda frowned in confusion. "Howard Bennett? I don't know any Howard Bennett." "Mr. Bennett is waiting upstairs. Your neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, was kind enough to let him wait in her apartment. I assure you, this is a matter of great importance and potential benefit to your family." Amanda's confusion deepened. Mrs. Jenkins had let a stranger into her apartment, the kind but cautious elderly woman. "What is this about?" Amanda demanded, her tone hardening. "If you're selling something—" "Nothing of the sort," Richard assured her. "Mr. Bennett merely wishes to discuss a proposal, one that could significantly impact your children's future in a positive way." Amanda hesitated, torn between suspicion and curiosity. "I need to check on my children first." Richard nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mrs. Jenkins' apartment, whenever you're ready." With a final wary glance, Amanda hurried inside and up to their 3rd-floor apartment. She found Jack and Sarah safely inside, Jack already setting out his homework on the kitchen table. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked, his young face serious. "Fine, honey," Amanda assured him, though her mind was racing. "I need to speak with Mrs. Jenkins for a minute. Stay here, both of you. Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me." Jack nodded solemnly, understanding the unusual caution in his mother's voice. She crossed the hall and knocked on their neighbor's door, which opened almost immediately to reveal Mrs. Jenkins' kind face. "Amanda, dear," the older woman said warmly. Come in, come in. There's someone very important who wants to meet you." Amanda stepped cautiously into the apartment. immediately noticing the elderly man seated in Mrs. Jenkins' floral armchair. Despite his obviously expensive suit and the quiet authority he projected, something about him seemed familiar. Then he smiled, and Sarah's words echoed in her mind. "He looks like Grandpa did in the pictures before he went to heaven." "Hello, Miss Collins," Howard Bennett said, his deep voice gentle. "We have a mutual acquaintance, I believe. A very special little girl who shared her sandwich with a stranger in the park." Amanda's eyes widened as recognition dawned. "You're not actually homeless," Howard finished with a self-deprecating smile. "Please, sit down. I have something very important to discuss with you about your daughter's extraordinary act of kindness and what it has come to mean to me." Mrs. Jenkins's apartment smelled of cinnamon and old books, a comforting contrast to the surreal conversation unfolding within its walls. Amanda sat perched on the edge of the floral sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap as she listened to Howard Bennett's extraordinary tale. "I've spent the past 6 weeks visiting different neighborhoods throughout Millfield," Howard explained, his dignified voice a stark departure from the mumbling homeless man Sarah had encountered. "Disguised, anonymous, testing humanity in its rawest form." "Testing," Amanda echoed, still struggling to process the situation. Howard nodded, his blue eyes, the same ones that had drawn Sarah's attention, suddenly weary. "I received a diagnosis 2 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months to live, perhaps less." "I'm sorry," Amanda said automatically, the genuine empathy in her voice making Howard smile sadly. "At 78, with billions in assets and not a single person who cares about me rather than my money, the diagnosis was clarifying," Howard continued. "I've built an empire, Miss Collins, but no legacy. No family to carry forward anything but my name on buildings and bank accounts." Richard stood by the window, silent but watchful. Mrs. Jenkins had discreetly excused herself to check on the children across the hall, giving them privacy. "Your daughter," Howard said, his voice softening, "was the first person in 6 weeks of my experiment who showed genuine kindness without expectation of return. A child with so little, giving freely to someone she thought needed it more." Amanda's throat tightened with emotion. "Sarah has always been like that. Even when we barely have enough, she finds ways to share." Howard nodded, as if this confirmed something important. "I have $14 billion, Miss Collins. No children. No close family except a sister who sees me as nothing but a bank account. In 6 months, it will all pass to various charities selected by my board of directors. Good causes, but impersonal. Sterile." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from his frail frame. "I want to give it to Sarah instead." The words hung in the air between them. Amanda blinked, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me." "Not directly to a 6-year-old, of course," Howard clarified with a slight smile. "I've established a trust. Richard has prepared all the legal documents. You would be the primary trustee until Sarah turns 25, with provisions for Jack as well. There are safeguards, educational trusts, investment structures." "Wait," Amanda interrupted, rising to her feet. You can't be serious. You want to give your fortune to my daughter because she shared a sandwich?" Richard stepped forward. "Mr. Bennett is entirely serious, Ms. Collins. The legal framework is complete. Essentially, your family would become the primary beneficiaries of the Bennett estate, with you as guardian of the children's interests until they reach adulthood." Amanda's mind raced, unable to process the magnitude of what was being proposed. "This is insane," she whispered. "We're strangers to you." So are the charities that would otherwise receive my money," Howard countered calmly. "At least this way, I know it's going to someone with a genuine heart, someone who gave without expectation when she had almost nothing herself." Amanda paced the small living room, her thoughts chaotic. Why not just? I don't know. Set up a college fund for the kids? Make a donation? Why something so extreme? Howard's expression grew distant. My mother worked 3 jobs to put me through school. By the time I made my first million, she was gone. Cancer, like me. She never got to enjoy what her sacrifice created. His eyes refocused on Amanda. You remind me of her. Working multiple jobs, putting your children first. I can't go back and give my mother the life she deserved, but I can do this. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but Amanda's protective instincts remained on high alert. There has to be a catch. No catch, Richard interjected. Though there are conditions designed to protect both the children and the assets. Educational requirements, age restrictions on certain assets, financial management provisions, all standard for trusts of this magnitude. And what do you want from us? Amanda pressed, looking directly at Howard. From Sarah? Howard's answer was simple. A family for my final months. Not legally or officially, though Richard has prepared guardianship documents should you wish to formalize things, but in spirit. I have a large empty house and not much time left. I'd like to spend it with people who see me as more than a bank account or a business opportunity. The naked vulnerability in the billionaire's admission struck Amanda deeply. Behind the wealth and power sat a dying old man, alone in the world despite all his success. I need to think about this, she said finally. This is overwhelming. Of course, Howard agreed immediately. Take whatever time you need. Richard will leave all the documents for your review. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it on Mrs. Jenkins's coffee table. My personal number. Call day or night when you decide. As if on cue, the apartment door opened and Mrs. Jenkins returned with Sarah and Jack. Sarah's eyes widened in recognition. It's the park man, she exclaimed, then tilted her head in confusion. But you're wearing different clothes. Howard's stern face transformed with a genuine smile. Hello again, Sarah. Thank you for the sandwich the other day. It was the best meal I've had in a very long time. Sarah beamed, pleased that her gift had been appreciated. Jack stood protectively beside his sister, his expression cautious as he assessed the strangers in their neighbor's apartment. Children, Amanda said carefully, this is Mr. Bennett. He knew your grandfather. The small lie came easily, a simplified explanation for her still processing mind. Howard played along smoothly. Your mother tells me you're quite the scientist, Jack, and Sarah, that you're learning to read chapter books. Jack nodded warily. Yes, sir. Mr. Bennett has to leave now, Amanda continued, but we might see him again soon. As Howard rose with effort from his chair, his knees betraying his age and illness, Sarah approached him without hesitation. Do you feel better today? She asked earnestly. You looked sad in the park. Howard knelt with difficulty to meet her at eye level, his aged face softening. I feel much better today, Sarah. You helped me more than you could possibly know. The child's spontaneous hug clearly caught the billionaire by surprise. For a moment, his composed facade cracked, revealing a profound emotion that made Amanda's throat tighten again. The Bennett estate sprawled across 5 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds on Millfield's north side. As Richard's car passed through the ornate iron gates, Sarah pressed her face against the window, blue eyes wide with wonder. Jack maintained his practiced nonchalance, though his rapid glances betrayed his amazement at the mansion that appeared as they rounded the curved driveway. It looks like a castle, Sarah whispered, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit tighter. Amanda squeezed her daughter's hand, her own emotions a complex mixture of awe and apprehension. The sheer scale of wealth represented by the estate hammered home the magnitude of Howard's offer. This wasn't just about financial security, it was entry into a world they had only glimpsed from the outside. Mr. Bennet is waiting in the main parlour, Richard informed them as he parked before the grand entrance. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, will show you in. As if on cue, the massive front door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s with a kind face and silver-streaked dark hair. "Welcome to Bennet House," she greeted them warmly. "I'm Dorothy Winters. Mr. Bennet is very excited about your visit." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than its exterior. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, artwork that Amanda suspected cost more than she would earn in several lifetimes. Yet despite its grandeur, the house had a hollow feeling, as if its vast spaces had never truly been filled with life. Dorothy led them through a series of rooms, each more elegant than the last, before arriving at a sunlit parlour where Howard Bennet waited. He rose with some effort as they entered, his face lighting up at the sight of the children. "Welcome," he said simply, but the warmth in his voice was unmistakable. "I'm so glad you came." Sarah, typically shy with strangers, broke free from her mother's hand and approached Howard directly. "Your house is very big," she observed with a child's candor. "Do you get lost?" Howard laughed, a rich sound that seemed to surprise even him. "I did actually when I first moved here. Dorothy had to rescue me from the East Wing more than once." The ice broken, Howard gestured toward comfortable seating arranged near large windows overlooking the gardens. "Please, make yourselves at home." Amanda noticed how the billionaire's eyes followed Sarah as she explored the room, touching the fabric of the curtains, examining the intricate carvings on a wooden chess set. There was something almost hungry in his gaze, not unsettling, but deeply yearning. "Perhaps you'd like a tour," Howard suggested. "The children might enjoy seeing the game room and the pool." Jack's practiced indifference cracked at the mention of a pool. "You have a pool? Inside?" "Indoor and outdoor," Howard confirmed with a slight smile. "And a movie theater, a library with more children's books than the public one, and a kitchen where Mrs. Peterson, our cook, makes the best chocolate chip cookies in Millfield." "Can we see?" Sarah asked, bouncing slightly with excitement. Amanda nodded, her own curiosity piqued despite her reservations. As they followed Howard through the mansion, she noticed how he occasionally steadied himself against walls or furniture, subtle reminders of his advancing illness that he clearly tried to hide. The tour revealed a home of extraordinary luxury, yet strangely impersonal. Despite the expensive furnishings and perfect decor, there were few photographs, no souvenirs or mementos, none of the small, meaningful items that transform a house into a home. The game room, however, broke the pattern. Filled with everything from the latest video game systems to classic board games, it seemed designed for children who had never visited. Sarah gasped at the dollhouse that stood taller than she did, while Jack gravitated toward a professional-grade table tennis setup. "I had this room prepared when I built the house," Howard explained to Amanda quietly, "for the family I thought I would have someday." "You never married?" Amanda asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. Howard didn't seem to mind. "Once, briefly, in my 30s, Caroline was extraordinary, but my work came first in those days. She wanted children. I wanted empire building." His voice held no bitterness, only regret. By the time I realized my mistake, she had found happiness with someone else. I'm glad for her, though sometimes I wonder how different my life might have been. "And this," Howard announced as they entered another wing, "would be your family's area if you decide to accept my proposal." The family wing, as Howard called it, contained 3 beautifully appointed bedrooms, a master suite for Amanda and individual rooms for each child, along with a shared living space that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. "You would have complete privacy here," Howard explained, "your own entrance if desired. The staff would respect your space unless specifically invited in." Sarah immediately claimed the bedroom with pale blue walls and a canopy bed, while Jack approached his potential room, equipped with a computer, telescope and walls lined with books, with guarded fascination. "It's a lot to take in," Amanda said quietly to Howard as they watched the children explore. Howard nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It would be a significant change, but children are adaptable, and these spaces are yours to make your own. Nothing is set in stone." The tour concluded in a sunny conservatory where Dorothy had arranged lunch. As they ate sandwiches far more elaborate than the simple peanut butter ones Sarah had shared, Howard answered Amanda's practical questions about schooling. The children could remain at their current school with private transportation provided. Amanda's education, a dedicated study space would be created for her nursing coursework, and daily logistics. Throughout lunch, Amanda observed how Howard interacted with her children, the genuine interest he showed in Jack's science projects, the patience with which he listened to Sarah's stories about her stuffed animals. This wasn't a man playing a role or making a business transaction. His connection with her children, especially Sarah, was genuine. The decision to accept Howard's proposal didn't come easily. Amanda spent a week weighing every aspect, consulting with Richard about the legal and financial details, and most importantly, talking openly with Jack and Sarah about what such a dramatic change would mean for their family. "But what happens after Mr. Bennett dies?" Jack had asked bluntly, getting straight to the heart of his concerns. "Will we have to leave? Will everything change again?" Richard had been present for that conversation, explaining the intricacies of the trust in terms a 10-year-old could understand. "The house and the trust fund will remain yours, Jack. Legally binding, completely protected. No one can take them away, not even Mr. Bennett's sister or business associates." For Sarah, the decision was simpler. "Mr. Howard needs a family," she'd said with her characteristic empathy, "and his house is big enough for all our hearts." 3 weeks after first meeting Howard, the Collins family moved into Bennett House. Their few belongings looked almost comically out of place in the elegant surroundings. Sarah's collection of stuffed animals, Jack's dog-eared science books, Amanda's nursing textbooks, but Howard had insisted they bring everything that made them feel at home. "This house has plenty of expensive things," he'd said. "What it lacks are the things that matter." Adapting to life at Bennett House proved challenging in unexpected ways. Amanda found herself constantly conscious of the staff's presence, feeling like an imposter in designer clothes that Howard had insisted on providing. "You're not playing dress-up," he'd told her gently. "You're stepping into a role you were always meant for, being able to focus on your children and your education without constant financial worry." Jack maintained a careful distance from Howard, polite but reserved, afraid to become attached to either the man or the lifestyle. He approached the mansion like a scientific experiment, methodically exploring its features while holding back emotional investment. Sarah, naturally adaptable at 6, transitioned with the least difficulty. She charmed the staff, explored every corner of the grounds, and developed a routine of afternoon tea parties with Howard, where they would sit in the garden with her collection of stuffed animals, discussing everything from butterflies to the stars. For Howard, the family's presence transformed the mansion from a showcase into a home. The sound of children's laughter echoed through previously silent hallways. Drawings appeared on refrigerator doors. Toys occasionally littered the formal sitting room. He observed these changes with quiet delight, as if witnessing a miracle. His health, however, continued to decline. Some mornings he was too weak to leave his bedroom, though he insisted these episodes be downplayed to avoid worrying the children. Dr. Chen visited regularly, adjusting his medications and monitoring his condition with increasing concern. "He's pushing himself too hard," she confided to Amanda after one such visit. "Trying to maximize his time with all of you. It's admirable, but accelerating his decline." Amanda found herself in the unexpected position of health advocate for Howard, insisting he rest when needed and take his pain medication despite his concerns about mental clarity. "You don't need to be stoic for us," she told him firmly one evening after finding him gripping his desk in pain, unwilling to take his prescribed medication before a planned movie night with the children. "They need to understand this is part of life too. The hard parts as well as the joyful ones." Howard looked at her with surprise, then reluctant acceptance. "You sound like my mother," he admitted, finally accepting the pills she offered. "She never let me hide from difficult truths either." 8 weeks into their new living arrangement, Amanda was reviewing her nursing textbooks in the mansion's library when Richard appeared at the doorway, his normally composed expression troubled. "We have a situation," he said without preamble. "Eleanor Bennett has arrived unannounced, Howard's sister." Amanda's stomach tightened. Though Howard had mentioned his sister, the only living family he had, it was always with a mixture of resignation and regret. Their relationship had deteriorated decades ago, with Eleanor contacting her brother only when she needed financial assistance. "Does Howard know?" Amanda asked, closing her book. Richard nodded grimly. She went directly to his study. The conversation has been heated. As if on cue, a woman's voice suddenly echoed down the hallway, sharp with accusation. "You've completely lost your mind, Howard, giving everything to strangers, some waitress and her brats. I'm your sister, your blood." Amanda winced at both the volume and the content. Jack and Sarah were playing in the garden, thankfully out of earshot, but the staff would certainly hear every word. "Should I?" Amanda began uncertainly. "Howard specifically asked that you stay away until he calls for you." Richard interrupted apologetically. "He doesn't want you subjected to Eleanor's opinions." The shouting continued intermittently for nearly an hour before Dorothy appeared, her usual calm demeanor ruffled. "Ms. Collins? Mr. Bennett asks if you would join him in his study. The children should remain outside with Thomas." Amanda smoothed her simple cotton dress, still unused to the idea that she could afford better, and followed Dorothy to Howard's study. The imposing oak door stood partially open, revealing Howard seated behind his desk, looking pale but composed. Across from him stood a striking woman in her 60s, expensively dressed with perfectly coiffed hair, and Howard's same piercing blue eyes, currently narrowed with hostility. "Ah, here she is now," Howard said as Amanda entered. "Amanda, this is my sister Eleanor. Eleanor, this is Amanda Collins." Eleanor didn't offer her hand, instead scrutinizing Amanda with undisguised contempt. "So you're the waitress who's managed what dozens of society women couldn't, getting your hands on the Bennett fortune." Amanda flinched at the accusation but met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I didn't ask for anything, Miss Bennett. Your brother offered to help my family." "How convenient," Eleanor snapped. "A poor widow with 2 photogenic children. Did you research his terminal diagnosis before targeting him, or was that just a lucky coincidence?" "That's enough, Eleanor," Howard interrupted, his voice strengthening with anger. "Amanda and her children have brought more genuine joy into my life in 2 months than you have in 30 years. They didn't approach me. I sought them out, and my decision regarding my estate is final." Eleanor's perfectly made-up face contorted with fury. "This isn't over, Howard. Father would be disgusted by what you're doing. Throwing away the Bennett legacy on strangers while your own blood gets practically nothing." She turned to Amanda, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And you, enjoy playing princess in this castle while you can. I promise you won't be here long after he's gone." With that final threat, she swept from the room, leaving a charged silence in her wake. Howard sighed heavily, the confrontation having clearly drained his limited energy. "I apologize for my sister. She's always felt entitled to my money without ever wanting an actual relationship. Amanda moved to the chair Eleanor had vacated. "She's upset. And she's your family." Howard shook his head. "Biology doesn't make family, Amanda. Actions do. Care does. The kind of love your children show each other, that's family." He paused, fatigue evident in his face. "Eleanor will contest the trust after I'm gone. Richard is prepared for that, but I'm sorry you'll have to deal with her hostility." "We'll manage," Amanda assured him, though Eleanor's venom had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. "Should I be worried about what she might do?" Howard's expression grew troubled. "Eleanor can be vindictive, but the legal protections are solid. Just be vigilant, especially where the children are concerned." That night, Amanda double-checked the locks on the family wing's doors before going to bed, Eleanor's threatening words echoing in her mind. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a newspaper article. "Billionaire's bizarre bequest, Bennett fortune going to diner waitress," screamed the headline of the Millfield Gazette's front page, accompanied by unflattering photos of Amanda leaving the diner and the children at school. "How did they get these pictures?" Amanda asked Richard, spreading the newspaper across the kitchen table while the children were still asleep. "And who told them about the arrangement?" Richard's expression was grim. "Eleanor, almost certainly. She couldn't break the confidentiality agreements directly, but she could leak enough information to spark interest. The reporter did the rest." The article painted Amanda as a manipulative gold digger who had enchanted the ailing billionaire and inserted herself and her children into his household with suspicious speed. It quoted sources close to the Bennett family, describing Howard as mentally compromised by his illness and vulnerable to exploitation. "This is character assassination," Amanda said, her hands shaking as she folded the newspaper. "How am I supposed to show my face at work after this?" Howard, who had joined them midway through the conversation, placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You hold your head high, because you've done nothing wrong. We anticipated something like this, which is why Richard documented my mental competency with 3 separate psychiatric evaluations before finalizing the trust." Despite Howard's reassurances, the article marked the beginning of a coordinated campaign against the Collins family. Anonymous calls came to the mansion at all hours. Amanda's manager at the diner reported customers asking invasive questions about her. Worst of all, Jack came home from school with a black eye after defending his mother's honor against classmates who had repeated their parents' gossip. "I hate this," Jack exploded after Amanda iced his swollen eye. "Everything was fine before. We didn't have fancy stuff, but nobody bothered us." Amanda pulled her son into a hug, feeling his thin shoulders shake with suppressed emotion. "I know, buddy. I'm so sorry this is happening." "Why do people care so much about Mr. Bennett's money?" Jack asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "It's his, not theirs." "People get strange about money," Amanda explained, choosing her words carefully, "especially large amounts of it. They think it should go to certain people or be used certain ways." The media attention and social backlash took a toll on all of them, but it also solidified their bond with Howard. The shared adversity created a surprising intimacy, turning them from beneficiaries into defenders, from recipients into protectors. Howard had given them security. Now they gave him loyalty in return. Autumn gave way to winter, the mansion's gardens transforming under a blanket of snow that delighted Sarah and provided Jack with the perfect setting for scientific experiments on crystallization and insulation. Christmas approached, the first without financial stress in Amanda's adult life, but also likely the last that Howard would witness. Despite his declining health, Howard insisted on being involved in the holiday preparations. From his wheelchair, or, on better days, supported by his cane, he supervised the decoration of an enormous Christmas tree in the main hall, consulted on menu planning with Mrs. Peterson, and mysteriously disappeared into his study with Richard for hours of secretive discussion. "He's planning something," Dorothy confided to Amanda as they arranged pine boughs along the staircase. "I haven't seen him this animated in months." Whatever Howard was planning remained a carefully guarded secret until Christmas Eve. The day arrived with perfect storybook weather, gently falling snow, a crackling fire in the great room's massive fireplace, and the scent of gingerbread permeating the house. Howard appeared for dinner, looking stronger than he had in weeks, dressed in a velvet smoking jacket that Sarah declared made him look like Santa Claus's rich brother. After a feast that left everyone pleasantly stuffed, Howard cleared his throat. "I have something special planned for this evening, if everyone is amenable. A small expedition." Amanda exchanged surprised glances with Dorothy. Howard had barely left the house in weeks except for medical appointments. "An expedition where?" "Just to the boathouse," Howard replied with a mysterious smile. "I promise it's worth the journey." Bundled against the cold, the unusual procession made its way down the illuminated garden path to the large structure at the edge of the property's small lake. Howard, insisting on walking despite Amanda's concerns, leaned heavily on his cane but maintained a steady pace, his face alight with barely contained excitement. The boathouse, a charming structure Amanda had only glimpsed from a distance, had been transformed. Thousands of fairy lights illuminated its exterior, reflecting magically off the frozen lake. As Richard opened the doors, Sarah gasped audibly. Inside, the boathouse had become a Christmas wonderland. A second, smaller tree glittered with ornaments. Comfortable seating had been arranged around a portable heating system. And everywhere, covering shelves, tabletops, and specially constructed displays, were the most extraordinary toys and gifts the children had ever seen. "I believe in functional gifts," Howard announced as the children stood speechless with wonder. "Everything here has a purpose beyond mere amusement. The telescope connects to the universe. The chemistry set builds scientific understanding. The dollhouse teaches design and spatial relations." Jack approached a professional-grade microscope with reverent hands. "This is better than the one at school," he whispered. Sarah was drawn to an elaborate puppet theater, complete with dozens of handcrafted puppets. "Can I put on shows?" "Do?" she asked, eyes shining. Howard nodded, clearly delighted by their reactions. "That's the idea, entertainment that creates rather than merely consumes." He turned to Amanda. "I hope you don't mind this extravagance. Consider it making up for the Christmases I missed." Amanda was too moved to object, recognizing the joy Howard took in the children's happiness. This wasn't about spoiling them with material things. It was about creating memories, experiences, opportunities for growth that would outlast the gifts themselves. As the children explored their wonderland, Howard beckoned Amanda to a quieter corner where Richard waited with a leather portfolio. "I have something for you as well," Howard said. "Less whimsical, perhaps, but potentially more significant." Inside the portfolio were documents establishing the Collins Family Foundation, a charitable organization with substantial initial funding and a mission statement focused on supporting single-parent families, educational access, and medical research, particularly in pancreatic cancer treatment. "You'll chair the board," Howard explained, as Amanda scanned the documents in amazement. "Jack and Sarah will join when they're older. It's an opportunity to channel some of this wealth toward causes you believe in, to make a difference beyond your immediate family." Amanda looked up, tears threatening. "Howard, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use it wisely," he replied simply. that you'll teach the children that true wealth lies in what you give, not what you have. That night, after tucking exhausted but jubilant children into bed, Amanda found Howard in his study, looking drained but deeply satisfied. "Thank you," she said simply, taking the chair opposite his. "Not just for the gifts, but for what they represent. Opportunities, experiences, memories they'll carry forever." Howard nodded, his expression turning reflective. "I've been thinking about legacy, Amanda. What we leave behind. I built companies, acquired properties, amassed wealth. But until you and the children came, I had no one to share any real wisdom with, no one to carry forward anything but my name and money." One snowy afternoon in January, as Amanda sat with Howard while he dozed, Richard appeared at the bedroom door, his expression grave. "We have a problem," he said quietly, gesturing for Amanda to join him in the hallway. "A serious one. Eleanor has uncovered something from Howard's past, something he believed was deeply buried. She's threatening to make it public unless the trust arrangements are modified in her favor." "What kind of something?" Amanda asked, immediately wary. Richard hesitated, glancing toward Howard's room. "It's not my place to reveal. Howard needs to decide what to tell you, but it's potentially damaging to his reputation and, by extension, to your family's position here." Amanda felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather. "Blackmail, that's what she's resorted to?" "Essentially, yes," Richard confirmed grimly. "She's demanding a meeting tomorrow. With Howard too ill to attend, she insists you represent the family's interests. I strongly advise against it." Amanda squared her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of Eleanor Bennett." Richard's expression remained troubled. "Perhaps you should be. She's desperate and has resources at her disposal. And this information, it could change how you view everything." The next day, Amanda found herself in a private dining room at the Millfield Grand Hotel. Eleanor Bennett sat across from her, immaculately dressed and flanked by two men Amanda didn't recognize. "Ms. Collins," Eleanor greeted her with artificial warmth. "How kind of you to come. I trust my brother is comfortable." The emphasis on the final word carried clear implication. Howard was dying, and everyone knew it. Amanda refused to rise to the bait. "Howard is receiving excellent care. He sends his regards." Eleanor's smile tightened. "I'm sure he does. Allow me to introduce Martin Voss, my attorney, and James Wilson, an investigative journalist who has been researching some fascinating aspects of the Bennett family history." The journalist, a sharp-featured man with predatory eyes, nodded curtly. "Ms. Collins, I've been learning quite a lot about your benefactor." Richard intervened smoothly. "I understood this meeting was to discuss Eleanor's concerns about the trust arrangements. If it's instead an attempt at intimidation through unsubstantiated allegations, we'll take our leave." Eleanor waved a manicured hand dismissively. "No need for theatrics, Richard. We're simply establishing context." She turned to Amanda. "How much do you actually know about my brother's early business dealings? The foundation of the Bennett fortune?" Amanda maintained her composure. "I know Howard built his company from nothing into one of the largest privately held corporations in the country. I know he's respected in the business community and has been generous with his philanthropy." "Such a sanitized version," Eleanor remarked with false sympathy. "Has he mentioned Westbrook, Michigan, 1972? No?" Her smile turned cruel as she registered Amanda's blank expression. "I thought not." The journalist slid a folder across the table. "Howard Bennett's first major development project, a factory complex that brought jobs to a struggling community. Very laudable on the surface. What wasn't publicized was that the land was acquired through some questionable methods." Amanda didn't touch the folder. "What methods?" "The previous owner was a man named Joseph Miller. Small factory employing about 50 local people. Howard needed his land to complete the development footprint. Miller refused to sell. Shortly afterward, a series of unfortunate accidents plagued Miller's operation. Equipment failures, a small fire, even an explosion that injured 3 workers. Howard had nothing to do with any of that, Richard interjected firmly. Perhaps not directly, Eleanor conceded with exaggerated reasonableness. But his business partner at the time, Victor Reeves, had connections to certain elements willing to apply pressure. Within 6 months, Miller was forced to sell at a fraction of the property's value. His family was essentially ruined. He took his own life 2 years later. Amanda felt physically ill at the implication. "I don't believe Howard would be involved in anything like that." "Belief is such a personal thing," Eleanor replied. "What matters is what Mr. Wilson's exposé will reveal to the public. Documents, witness statements, financial transactions, the story of how the great Howard Bennett built his fortune on intimidation, coercion, and indirect violence." "This is blackmail, Eleanor," Richard stated flatly. "I prefer to think of it as negotiation," Eleanor countered smoothly. "My terms are reasonable. The trust arrangements are modified to provide me with 30% of the estate. The Collins family retains the rest. Still an obscenely generous provision. In exchange, Mr. Wilson's investigation remains unpublished." The drive back to Bennett House passed in tense silence. Amanda's mind raced, trying to reconcile the Howard she knew, kind, generous, genuinely concerned for others, with the ruthless businessman Eleanor had described. "Is it true?" she finally asked Richard as they approached the mansion gates. "What she said about Westbrook?" Richard sighed heavily. "Parts of it, yes. Howard was young, ambitious, and partnered with Victor Reeves, who had few scruples about achieving their business goals. When Howard discovered what Reeves had orchestrated regarding Joseph Miller, he severed the partnership immediately. He tried to make amends, anonymously funded Miller's children's education, created jobs for the displaced workers, but the damage was done. When they arrived home, Howard was awake but weak, propped against pillows and receiving oxygen. One look at Amanda's face told him everything. "Eleanor told you about Westbrook," he stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Amanda nodded, taking the chair beside his bed. "She's threatening to publish the story unless we change the trust. Give her 30%. Howard closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his features that had nothing to do with his physical condition. "And now you're wondering if everything, the trust, the arrangement for your family, was motivated by guilt, attempting to buy redemption." The thought had indeed crossed Amanda's mind during the drive home, but hearing him articulate it made her realize how wrong it was. "No," she said firmly. "I know why you chose us, and it wasn't about Westbrook or redemption. It was about Sarah's kindness, about connection." Howard's relief was visible. "Westbrook haunts me, Amanda. I didn't order what happened, but I benefited from it. I suspected what Reeves was capable of, but looked the other way until it was too late. When Joseph Miller took his life." He paused, gathering strength. "I've spent 50 years trying to ensure more good came from that money than the harm that seeded it." "What should we do about Eleanor's threat?" Amanda asked, practical concerns returning. Howard's expression hardened with a flash of his former strength. "We don't negotiate with blackmailers. Richard has prepared for this possibility. The trust is protected. Your family's security is assured, regardless of any publicity. But your reputation is less important than the truth," Howard interrupted. "Perhaps it's fitting that I face this reckoning before the end. No fortune is built without compromise, Amanda. Mine included darker compromises than most." He reached for her hand with surprising strength. "What matters is what happens next. How the money is used going forward. That's where you and the children come in, to ensure the Bennett name eventually stands for something better than its origins." The next morning, Richard conveyed their decision to Eleanor. No negotiation, no changes to the trust. Her response came swiftly. Advance copies of Wilson's exposé were delivered to major newspapers that afternoon. What Eleanor hadn't anticipated was Howard's countermove. His memoir, with its unflinching account of Westbrook and his subsequent efforts at atonement, was released simultaneously to selected journalists. The resulting coverage was far more nuanced than Eleanor had hoped, portraying Howard as flawed, but ultimately redeemed by his acknowledgement of past wrongs and decades of positive action. For Howard, however, the public battle proved too taxing. The day after the story broke, he suffered a severe decline, slipping into semi-consciousness. Dr. Chen increased his pain medication and warned Amanda that the end was approaching rapidly. "Days, perhaps," she said gently. "It might be time for final goodbyes." That evening, Amanda brought the children to Howard's bedside. Sarah, who had been making him a special drawing, climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed to show him her creation. "It's us having a tea party," she explained, pointing to the crayon figures. "See, that's you and me and Jack and Mommy and all my animals. And we're in heaven, so you're not sick anymore." Howard, rousing briefly from his sedated state, managed a smile. "It's beautiful, Sarah. The best gift I've ever received." Jack, maintaining his composure with visible effort, stepped forward next. "I finished the science project you helped me start," he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes, "about star formation. It won first place." "Excellent," Howard whispered. "Always curious. Keep asking questions." As the children said their goodbyes, each in their own way, Amanda was struck by how completely they had accepted Howard into their hearts. Not as a benefactor or billionaire, but simply as someone who had cared for them, listened to them, valued them. Howard Bennett died peacefully in his sleep at 4:17 a.m. on a snowy January morning. Amanda was dozing in the chair beside his bed when she noticed the change in his breathing, a subtle shift, then stillness. She held his hand as Dr. Chen confirmed what she already knew, feeling an unexpected depth of grief for someone who had entered their lives so recently, yet changed them so fundamentally. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the day that changed all their lives, Richard delivered a small package to Amanda. Inside was a letter in Howard's distinctive handwriting and a small velvet pouch containing Sarah's preserved half sandwich. The letter read, "My dear Collins family, 1 year ago today, Sarah demonstrated a truth I had nearly forgotten, that genuine kindness, offered without expectation of return, is humanity's greatest gift. My fortune is now yours to steward, but my true legacy lies not in bank accounts or properties. It lives in how you choose to move through the world, in Sarah's empathy, Jack's thoughtful determination, and Amanda's fierce grace in the face of challenges." That afternoon, Amanda took the children to the community park, where it all began. Sarah placed a fresh peanut butter sandwich on the bench where Howard had sat, then stepped back with solemn ceremony. "What's that for, sweetie?" Amanda asked, puzzled by the gesture. Sarah's explanation held the simple wisdom that had captivated Howard from the beginning. "In case another sad person needs it, Mr. Howard would want us to keep